And now, live from the 2015 Vancouver International Wine Festival, Anthony Gismondi and Casey Wilson. This is Tony and Casey's Best of Food and Wine on Sea Isle 650.
And it's just like the ocean under the moon. It's the same as the emotion that I get from you. You got the kind of loving that can be so smooth. Yeah. Give me your heart and make it real, or else forget about it.
Welcome back to the Best of Food and Wine. I'm Tony Gismondi.
I'm Casey Wilson.
We're going to California now. We've been traveling around the world, and our friend JerryComfort comes back and joins us from ChateauStJean from Sonoma County. Jerry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you in Vancouver.
Love it, love it, love it.
You brought the California weather, hot and dry with you, or warm and dry at least?
I think that's where we came from. And,
is it ever going to rain in California again? Or?
I heard we had some sprinkles, but it wasn't even enough to pretty much clean the driveway.
Yeah. Well, they wrote songs about that 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So
Right, you're right.
I guess there's something going on there. Well, welcome back. It's fun to have a chat. You're the first person we've met from Sonoma County this week.
Nice.
Yeah, which is kind of nice. And you brought two Chardonnays with you. We've been talking a lot about the style change of Chardonnay in Australia. But I think the same transformation is going on in Sonoma, or has gone on, actually.
Yeah, I think there's an evolution where really winemakers became wine growers, and they started really putting the right grapes into the right amount of oak development.
Yeah.
And so the cool climates were going into less oak and preserving the subtle fruit. And then you got into the warmer climates where it can handle more oak. So it's kind of appropriate.
Well, was it a food thing, too? Like, people wanted wines for food? Like, there was that whole movement as well that sort of leaned out Chardonnay, or?
My personal opinion is, like, ChateauStJean, they've been doing single vineyard Chardonnay since 1974.
Right.
And we have the Robert Young, which is a very good example here.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's actually in a warmer region. It's in Alexander Valley on the east side. It's next to Napa Valley.
Yeah.
So we never put that through malolactic fermentation, but it goes 14 months into oak because its ripeness can handle it. Mm-hmm. But then we have the Sonoma County Chardonnay here. Yeah. It's predominantly from the Sonoma coast and Carneros. It's cooler climate. It only goes into 8 months of oak, and it's not very much new. So it preserves that subtle fruit from the cool climate.
Yeah.
And the warmer climate of Alexander Valley can really absorb the oak flavor.
More tropical, some orange notes, all that stuff happening in that Alexander one.
Jerry, what you're a food and wine pairing expert. What would you pair with these Chardonnays?
Well, my personal direction on food and wine pairing really is based around foods that have an acid and salt balance, meaning, let's say sushi, right? Yeah. You have very low acid and salt.
Yes.
So you go to low oak wines. When you go into foods that same fish, let's say it's a sashimi of halibut, but now we take the halibut over and we cook the halibut. Most cultures in the world season their cooked foods with salt and usually can have an acid component. At that point, we can start to add wines that have more oak. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going with a Chablis style or a Sonoma Coast or a Sonoma County Chardonnay with less oak, I could actually pair it to some of these types of steamed lobster or low-salt sashimi dishes.
Yes.
And then once I take that same fish and I cook it, sautéed sole meunière or a grilled halibut with a lemon caper, I could go into the Robert Young that's a little bit more oak influenced. So that's what I kind of look at, is that balance of chemistry.
I have been dying to talk about really classic pairings of food and wine. And I mean pairings that when you taste them, you just sit up with it. And, well, one is a blue cheese with port is like to me, or a Stilton. It's a perfect pairing. What other pairings are there that people can try where when they try them, they think, now that pairing, it really shows you how well food and wine go together.
Right, and the one side of that coin is you gotta like the food and the wine before you can ever like them together.
Yes.
So in your example, if someone doesn't like blue cheese,
they're not.
Port and a blue cheese will never be a good pairing. If I don't like,
that's me.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's Tony.
And Sauvignon Blanc and goat cheese. If you don't like goat cheese, you ain't going to like it. If you don't like raw oysters and Chablis or Sancerre.
Yes.
So to me, first of all, you got to start off liking the foods. And then when you go to these, something like oysters, you put mignonette, vinegar. So if you go to Champagne, Chablis, Sancerre, they're high-acid wines, low oak, high-acid foods, low salt. That is part of the chemistry that makes those pairings work. When you have a port, if you have a high-salt cheese like blue cheese, then that will soften all wines to the point, if a dry wine, it'll almost turn it to water. So you need the residual sugar. The residual sugar in the port is already soft. So then when the blue cheese kicks in, it just gets richer and softer. And so if you like dessert wines like a port and you like blue cheese, that's what's happening in the chemistry. So I can't make a pairing, but I can kind of explain a pairing.
Yes.
But you could have lobster with the Alexander Valley Chardonnay, and it probably would be better than with the Sonoma County.
Well, I think once, Tony, you actually quoted me in the Toronto wine event where I said, don't pair to the protein, pair to the preparation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if I have a steamed lobster, it never sees salt.
Yeah.
And so that's umami bomb.
Yes.
But if I cook it in boiling water, chefs are taught to cook lobster in salted water, the level of seawater.
Yes.
Salt goes in. And then if I were to wrap that lobster tail in pancetta and serve it with a lemon beurre blanc, I could serve some light reds with it.
Yeah.
So don't pair to the lobster, pair to the preparation.
Yes, exactly.
You're too smart, Jerry.
He is.
But one thing I say, between these two different Chardonnays, interestingly enough, ChateauStJean, the first 8 years of its existence was pretty much white wine country.
Yep.
And then in the 80s, we had phylloxera. So we had to replant the estate to Bordeaux varieties, and we introduced 4 years later the Cinq Cépages.
Yeah.
And then in 1996, Cinq Cépages became the #1 wine in the world. So we're very proud of the fact that we had the single vineyard Chardonnays that shined of place, like Robert Young, Belterre. But then when Cinq Cépages came in, it actually emphasized the diversity of Sonoma, because those 5 different grape varieties of Bordeaux are planted in 5 different regions of Sonoma.
And you had some of the greatest dessert wines made in America in those days, the St. Jean half bottles. I remember them, of Botrytis, Riesling. They were amazing wines, TBAs. And
do you remember that? They actually even labeled it that way.
They did.
Trockenbeerenauslesen and Beerenauslesen.
That's because the Germans didn't even know where Sonoma County was, so it wasn't a problem then.
You know what's interesting is that also, the Robert Young and the Belterre were the first 2 single vineyard wines that ChateauStJean produced, and they're the pioneers of single vineyard labeling in Sonoma. The Belterre vineyard is interesting because that's where those Rieslings come from.
Yep.
The Rieslings are right next to the Russian River, where the mist comes in and gives you the Botrytis. You also have the Belterre Chardonnay, but we also have Cabernets planted in that same vineyard that go into the Cinq Cépages.
Yeah.
How many times does that happen around the world?
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It's pretty cool.
They're very cool. Great wines. America, sometimes we look at America and we think they're not as hip with wine. Is it changing? Or, there's a whole screw cap issues, not doing that well in America.
Right.
But I don't know. Then you go to some places and it's very hip. So you're the #1 consumer now of fine wine in the world.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is that I think all of us have a learning curve, right? And so I think all of us, it doesn't mean that everybody will start at the same place in wine drinking and end in the same place, but I do think that the people that have never drank wine before or are introduced to wine, that, when you go to sour grapes and you come off of cocktails and you come off of beers, it's kind of a shock. Or Starbucks. I don't even know what a Frappuccino is, but, that's a big shock when you then go into a dry Cabernet or a beautiful Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a learning curve. And so as population start to enjoy wine, they're going to gravitate initially to wines that are less strong, less in your face as far as tannins and acids, and they're softer. And then some people will then explore out and they'll get into, even at ChateauStJean, we have a couple of entry-level wines that are great, Soirée and Bijou. And Bijou's a lightly oaked screw cap Chardonnay. We introduced that about 2 years ago. And then we get into our, what we would say, more of our luxury wines, the Sonoma County and the Robert Young. And just standing here tonight in Vancouver, pouring to people, and a lot of people are going, I'm not really a Chardonnay drinker, but I'm telling them, this is one of the historic Chardonnays of California.
Yeah.
It's an icon of California. You should try the Robert Young.
Yes.
And I would say 9 out of 10 people who said they don't drink Chardonnay go,
wow.
Well, this is pretty good Chardonnay.
Yeah. Well, I always wonder where that comes from. I'm not a Chardonnay drinker, or I don't know. I guess there was a period. Obviously, there was a period when Chardonnay wasn't that popular amongst people, but it's the number one selling white wine varietal around the world.
It's true. It's true.
It's hard to believe that people aren't Chardonnay drinkers.
And I do think that, like you just said, when I talked about the difference when there was winemakers and wine growers,
yes.
winemakers were, I believe, 20 years ago, were taught, the best Chardonnays in the world all go into oak. Mm-hmm. So no matter where the grape came from, it went into new oak. And then people said, well, all the Chardonnays are over oak. But the winemakers of today have understood and respect place environments, so that again this Robert Young in a warmer environment can handle more oak, and then a Sonoma Coast, you put it into new oak and you're drinking 2x4s. Mm-hmm. So the Sonoma Coast goes into less new oak for a shorter amount of time, and you're actually kind of giving credence to the quality of the fruit, not so much the winemaking.
Our guest is JerryComfort. He's speaking to us from ChateauStJean Winery in Sonoma County. Jerry, I don't know, you've been coming here now for quite a while.
Pretty close to 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
So you've seen the growth of the show in the city. You still come back. You enjoy coming to Canada.
Enthusiastically. Vancouver is one of my favorite places, and this is probably my favorite wine festival in the world.
It's crazy, eh? There's such a nice vibe in the room.
You know what? And this room is stunning.
Isn't it a beautiful room?
Yes.
And have you been to any of the restaurants yet in Vancouver? Have you had time to check any out?
I really haven't. We've been so involved in the festival. It is a shame, because I love it, and I love Yaletown, and I love the whole marina area, and so I look forward to having a little bit of spare time in the morning tomorrow to pick and choose a place where I could go enjoy something.
Casey's mind is wandering.
It is. Well,
you should have breakfast at Chambar.
Yes, you should have breakfast at Chambar, absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
You'll be blown away.
You're not here for dinner, because you should go to Bao Bay Chinese restaurant. If
really?
You're here. It's good to try the different Asian restaurants.
I'm sure it is, and I think also all of us probably are paying homage to Regis, but I don't get back there enough, so maybe once every 10 years I like to pop in there, because I think that's so great.
Chambar for breakfast.
Chambar. Okay, it's a deal.
JerryComfort from ChateauStJean. Thanks so much for the 2 Chardonnays you brought in, the Sonoma County and the Alexander Valley Robert Young Vineyard. 2 great examples of modern Chardonnay being made today in California.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great to see
Jerry.
you.
Cheers.
Stick around. Lots more coming up on the Best of Food and Wine from the floor of the Vancouver International Wine Festival. And, of course, we're broadcasting on only CIL 650, where everything is smooth and easy.
There's lots more still ahead. Live from the 2015 Vancouver International Wine Festival, this is Tony and Casey's Best of Food and Wine on CIL 650.